because at my age, I need something to lean on from time to time. Actually, I think I'm here as a fraud because when I go to speak someplace, usually people expect me to have pulled out of my file drawer one of a full file drawer of speeches about advertising or public relations or marketing. And I'm not going to talk about any of those things today. And I have never given this speech before. And the worst thing any audience likes to hear is, I've never given this, I don't know for sure what I'm going to say, but I'd like for you to pay attention to it. And if at any point in the speech I'm wasting my time and you want to hear something else, raise your hand and I'll talk about marketing. Okay? I know more about that. What I want to talk about is what I consider to be the city of Memphis' two biggest problems and two greatest opportunities. And they are a workforce that is by and large unskilled and by and large unwilling. Now we hear a lot of talk about the unskilled aspect. And I'm happy to say that we have two distinguished representatives of Moore-Tech here today because at Moore-Tech we get the unskilled part. But I have gotten very interested in the unwilling aspect of it. Primarily from, it comes from anecdotal experience. But I'd like to tell you a story to begin with about Charles Hadley. Nobody here knows Charles' name, but you may have read about him. There was a story about Charles in the Commercial Appeal twice. Charles came out of prison in 2010 where he had been sent for drug charges and check fraud charges. When Charles came out of prison, he had no skills. He could not get a full-time job. He worked a little at one of the Taco Bells part-time. But the Commercial Appeal wrote a story about him. Because of Charles' persistence, it took him months as a former prisoner in order to reestablish his Tennessee residency, to regain all of his ID materials, and then to get a driver's license. He had to go, and all of us know what a terrible thing it is to have to go to the driver's license bureau. Charles went 7 times before he passed the driver's test. So the Commercial Appeal wrote this story about his persistence and about an ex-convict, and it was a good story. Well, that's not the story. The best part, the story is that a guy named Rick Roberson, who owns Universal Glass Company, read about him in the paper. And Mr. Roberson told his wife, I believe that a guy who will go 7 times to get his driver's license, I think he might be a guy who would come to work every day. He interviewed him. Charles assured him he'd never let him down. He's been with him. I called Monday morning to make sure that Charles was still working there. Sure enough, he is. He is an apprentice glazier, and it struck me that here's a guy who owns his own company, and it's a successful company, and he had to hire an ex-convict who would not rank high in your choice of people to hire. I'm not saying whether he should or shouldn't, but most of us would not put ex-convicts near the top of our list. But he hired him despite all that because he thought he might come to work. And I can't tell you the number of friends I have, people I talk to, who say, I have jobs. It's hard to hire somebody who can do the job, but even in unskilled jobs, my biggest problem is not hiring the people, it's getting somebody who will show up and work. At More Tech, I have talked to our instructors, and they say our problem is not teaching the material, teaching the skills to these young men for the most part. We're beginning to get a few young ladies, and we'd like more. But they said the problem is convincing them that they have to show up. They have to come to work every day, even if they don't feel like it. If they had too good a time on the weekend, they still have to show up on Monday morning. So we have this terrible reputation of not only an unskilled workforce, but an unwilling workforce. And that's really bad. And where does that come from? I have done a lot of work in the last 10, 12 years, I guess, with the Urban Child Institute here in town, which is a wonderful outfit doing great work. And they put together a lot of statistics. 6 out of 10, over 6.2, something like that, children born every year in Memphis are born to single women. Even scarier, since we are now majority black, 82% of all the black babies born in Memphis every year are born to single women. Now, I'm not opposed to single women. I know I work with a lot of young ladies at Archer Malmo during the day who are single mothers for one reason or another. But I do know from these experiences with them that it's harder. It's harder if you're a single mother or a single father, I'm sure. Because I have been reading a book lately that is a bestseller that I recommend to everyone in the room. The title of it is How Children Succeed. It's written not by a psychiatrist or a psychologist, it's written by a journalist who has gone back and gathered all of the work that has been done in this area for decades. And the conclusion is, and all of those medical people agree and love this book. They don't argue with him. He says non-cognitive skills, persistence, self-control, curiosity, conscientiousness, grit, and self-confidence are the most critical to success in school and life. It's not test scores or raw intelligence that predict who will triumph. It's grit, curiosity, and persistence. It's Charles Hadley. Now, where do these come from? They come from a nurturing home. They come from security and love, which is a whole lot harder to deliver in the proper portions if you're a single parent, especially if you're a single parent living in poverty, and for God's sake, we have a huge percentage of our population living in poverty. So, how do we teach just show up 101? Where do we teach it? Should Head Start change what they do? Should Head Start not be worrying nearly so much about ABCs and that sort of thing? Should it be worrying? Should it be spending most of its time nurturing, petting, hugging the children that come there? Because these studies show that it doesn't have to come from a parent. That this self-confidence, this nurturing, this dependability on an environment can come from outside the home. So maybe that's where it comes from. But it scares me that until we make changes at that level, and the Early Child Institute will tell you it's in the first 3 years. Until we do that, we're going to continue to have an unwilling and unskilled workforce. Now, I'd like to address, I told you this was new material. I'd like to address now the unskilled portion. I blame the unskilled portion, and blame is the wrong word. But I think a lot of it has to do with our approach to education. And I can say these things because I am burdened with no knowledge whatsoever. But I think we all know that our education system for the last several decades has been designed to try to do one thing and one thing only, and that is prepare children to go to a four-year college. Anybody argue with that? I mean, we had a superintendent of education here in the city for years. That for every child, what was the slogan? Every child college bound, yeah. Something like that. And she didn't mean more tech. So the fact of the matter is that for the most part, we haven't given children a lot of choices. You go through 12 years, you take these things. We do have high schools now that have added and are giving vocational courses. We are working very hard at More Tech to try to get a dual enrollment arrangement with the city high schools so that kids in their senior year of high school could come and take a couple of courses at More Tech so that they could get a kind of a head start if that's what they wanted to do later. But it strikes me, tell me when I'm running.
No, you're fine. You're great. Thank you.
One of the things that bothers me is this business of white collar and blue collar. I made a commercial years ago, I think it was 2006, for More Tech, a TV commercial. And in it I said, if a tree falls on your car and you need a lawyer, you can have a lawyer in 5 minutes. You can have 24 lawyers in 10 minutes. There is a lawyer everywhere. Behind every tree, on your shopping cart, on every building. There are lawyers everywhere. But brother, when it's 98 and you need your air conditioner fixed, see how long it'll take to get an air conditioner out of your house. I mean, what does Memphis need most? More air conditioner technicians or more lawyers? You can get a broken leg fixed. If you fall right here, your broken leg will be fixed within an hour or two. But you can't get these things done. And part of the reason is because it's hard to get people to consider blue-collar jobs because we say they're blue-collar. Maybe people like me should come up with a better term for it. But at any rate, if a kid graduates from college and goes to work at your bank tomorrow morning, where are the bankers? You're the banker. And they go to work tomorrow morning, they might start out as a teller. And they'll probably make about somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000. It won't be 25, but it won't be 30, but it may be $1 or $2 over 25. At least that's what banker friends tell me. But the interesting thing is, nobody said he or she went to work is going to be a teller. Says she went to work for the bank. He went to work for the bank. But a kid who comes out of More Tech is a plumber. He's a plumber. Obviously, he's always going to be a plumber. Well, not necessarily, you see. If he has entrepreneurial bent, and if he has persistence, curiosity, grit, if he grew up in the right kind of environment, he very well might say after 5 or 10 years of working for one of these plumbing companies, hell, I'm going out and opening my own plumbing company. He's not a plumber anymore, he's a plumbing contractor. And in all probability, if he's successful, he's going to end up creating more wealth than that same person who went to work at the bank the same day. But we don't ever think of that. Let me give you an example. Pearson just told me she'd sent her little girl up to Tennessee. Now, from what I read, it's going to cost her $100,000 to get her out of there. But now that's not including joining a sorority and all this other stuff. That's just what she's going to end up paying the state of Tennessee for the most part. Now, at the same time, a child could come to Mortec, and in 2 years, and for $13,000, have an associate degree in HVAC, machine shop, plumbing, welding, and he could go out and he could go to work for that plumbing company or that HVAC company for 5 or 6 or 7 years. In the meantime, you, Daddy, have put the other $85,000 in the bank. And then, in 5 or 10 years, when he says, I have learned enough and I'm ready and I'm going to open my own company, there's $85,000 to start that company and assure, in all probability, its success. So, we just added to our board at Mortec our first Mortec graduate, who is now on the board of trustees. His name is Tom Wack. Tom came out of Mortec. He went to the Navy. He went to Memphis State part-time for other reasons, but he graduated from Mortec in industrial electricity. Tom owns DeSoto electrical contracting company just over the state line. Now, I would never ask Tom, but I would bet anybody here, whatever you got in your pocket, that he's worth 7 figures. Just no blue collar boy. So, that's the skill side. I would bet also that Charles Hadley is not going back to jail again. And that's because Charles can do something. He's a glazier. And there's no reason for him now to go out and deal fraudulently with checks. Will he get in trouble with drugs? I can't guarantee, but probably not, because I think those things are involved for a lot with problems, and Charles won't have as many problems. But the point is, if you want to do something in life, you've got to be able to do something. We graduate all these hundreds of thousands of kids from college every year, and they can't do anything. I don't interview anymore because I don't hire anymore. I sold my company because I didn't want to fool with personnel anymore. That was the reason I sold the company. No more personnel or P&L. I'm causing more terrible. So But I used to interview a lot, and I said, well, what can you do? Well, I graduated. I majored in this, I majored in that, and in our business, we didn't expect a lot of skills. But if you're not coming to our kind of business and you're going out there and all you have is a college degree and you don't have any skills, you can't do something. That's why there's so many people who can't find jobs. The jobs are out there. For God's sake, the jobs are out there. I'm reading this is stuff from the Wall Street Journal. U.S. manufacturers complain they can't find enough people skilled in operating or repairing sophisticated machinery. For every 3 tradesmen who retire, there's only 1 skilled person trained to perform the work to replace them. Pioneer Pipe in Ohio says last year the company paid 60 of its welders, not 1 or 2. They paid 60 of their welders more than $150,000, and 2 of them they paid over $200,000. Earlier, the Wall Street Journal says the United States has a shortage of 200,000 welders. The average age of a welder in the United States is 55 years old. My wife and I were in Canada a few weeks ago, and we were playing golf, and we got paired with 2 young fellows. One of them was a pretty good golfer, said he was going to try to get on the PGA, get on the pro tour. Asked the other kid what he was going to do. He was a rotten golfer. Asked him what he was going to do. He said, I'm getting ready to go to college to be a welder. Wow. He said in northern Canada, they're paying $300,000 for a welder.
Pipeline. Wow.
No, blue collar boys. The issue here, if I can find the right page again, is that there are enormous opportunities to learn to do something. And now for the commercial. There's more tech. We're the Harvard of vocational education. We teach building maintenance, HVAC, industrial electricity, machining, plumbing and welding. Kid I see every day in the building at the Cotton Exchange building works for Henry Turley. He graduated from Moore-Tech in building maintenance, got a job like that the next day with Henry. Now he's back at Moore-Tech going to night school taking HVAC. Going to add more skills. Going to keep adding more skills. I'm not going to talk any longer. I'm trying to run out of time. But I can give you a final personal example, and that when I came out of the Army in 1954, I had flunked out of school. That's why I got drafted. And I went to Boston to finish college. And when I got there, I had $40 in my pocket. And I didn't have any other source of money. My mother didn't have any money. My father was dead. And so I immediately, I just sat down and I said, well, what in the hell can I do? I can write. And I have worked for the Commercial Appeal, off and on. I was a stringer in the Army for sporting news and things like that. So I can write, so I'll just, in those days, newspapers were still in business. There were 3 daily newspapers in Boston. I couldn't get a job with any of them, so I said, well, what about these suburbs? And I went to a town of 100,000 people just south of Boston called Quincy. And I went to work for the Quincy Patriot Ledger, an afternoon newspaper, as the night editor of an afternoon newspaper, which means you work from midnight to 8. It was a very important job. They reported on the whole South Shore of Boston, and they had little old ladies in all these towns who wrote up the garden club activities and everything that was going on. And then at 10 o'clock at night, a taxi driver came around and picked up an envelope with all this, and they brought it to the Patriot Ledger, and there I was. I showed up at midnight, and I made up a couple of pages of garden club news from all over the South Shore. And that got me through 2 years in college and a full-time job at the newspaper the year after I graduated. But the point is, if I had shown up in Boston with $40 and no other sort, because I was gonna get the GI Bill, but it didn't start. The check didn't come for another month. And if you've ever known you had some money coming, but it ain't coming for another week or another month, that's difficult. But because I could do something. Now my wife tells me that when I talk like this, that she doesn't like it because she's a history graduate. My son's a history graduate. My daughter and I are English graduates. And these are listed as 4 of the worst majors that a kid can have coming out of college. Well, I don't believe that, because you do get a good education. And in the meantime, you also can learn to do something. But we need to figure out in Memphis how to take care of all of these babies and make them feel secure so that they can grow up with the kind of traits that create entrepreneurs. And we must figure out how to get more of these kids into more tech. We have 100 daytime students. We have 150 more at night. These are older men. But 100 daytime students. Do you know that they represent 35 different high schools? Do you know that we have kids from Briarcrest, ECS, CBHS, FACS? We have some private school kids. We want more. We want to upgrade our student body. We want kids who are willing and who want to learn skills.
Very good. Does anybody have any questions before John sits down and gets out? Does anybody have any questions for John? Mark?
Well, my question is, what do you, this is great talk, by the way.
Well, thank you.
How can we help take this to the next level where we change our educational system to divert, for lack of a better term, people towards these trades inside our high school system that exists now?
I don't know the answer to that because I don't know our high school system well enough. I mean, I'm typical. I'm a bell ringer for the problem without any solution. But the business, the skills I think are beginning to be addressed. We are very skeptical of for-profit vocational colleges. We know what they charge. We know what their facilities are, and we don't think they're in our league. But still, there are more of us growing. I mean, the Votech College across the river that's working with FedEx on aircraft, teaching kids to maintain aircraft, and we think Southwest is doing some good work. Right now, I tell you, the best thing you could do is write the damn governor and tell him to include more tech in this new 2-year free junior college. We can't be included for a purely technical reason that has nothing to do with anything important. It's because our accreditation group is different from the accreditation group that all the other schools can. But a kid can go now to Southwest and not learn HVAC nearly as well as he can at Moretech, and he can go there free. And he's got to come to our place and pay us about $6,500 a year. So we are working very hard to see if we can get the